Watcher, welcome back. Okay, part 23, stroke 1 of phase 2 of this Backend remake. This is going to be the part that I've been waiting for more than anything else. Now this whole back end is completely finished. I've taken probably another hour or so to make tiny little drill holes in here, reclip all this wiring. I've removed everything, slotted it in order, just fiddled around for about an hour or so and got everything looking really neat, drilled extra little holes, spent about probably 25 cable ties getting it absolutely finished. So I can forget that now and I'm absolutely chuffed. I don't want to be revisiting any of that. Now this next section, this is the bit that I think I can honestly safely say the bit you've all been waiting for. I'd like to think so. This is the bit that's going to be constructive again. It's a bit more fabrication. It's much more fun than wiring. Many people say they like wiring. It is therapeutic. It's not so dirty, but fabrication, it's just fabrication, isn't it? It's cool, isn't it? Welding stuff, grinding stuff, making noise and fuss and smoke and sparks. Fantastic. So this section involves making a little frame, first of all. Many people said I haven't even got a clue how this is going to be made or how we're going to do it. It's ever so simple. I've got it all mapped out. I've got a couple of different directions for the shape mapped out in my head, and they're kind of all chopped up into bits and jumbled up. So what I don't want to do is make a plan. The reason for this is quite simple. To have planned out the tail unit, the seat unit itself, absolutely to the last letter, have it all drawn out and then just execute, that would be a shame, because that doesn't allow for creative process. See, this section, for example, this is the point why I didn't want to draw anything or make any sort of plan or any sort of drawings for this. Purely want it to evolve as I go along stage by stage. Take these trellis bars, for instance. I had no plan to do that. If I'd just drawn this tail, my initial plan was to weld a couple of these box section bars across the back and then make a tail piece that covers it all up. If I just thought of that at the beginning and decided to go with that, made it, then it would have been reasonably boring and this wouldn't exist now. It's only till I got to this point where the jig cross was welded in and I sat with these little tubes, like you do, just thinking, working away at work, driving home from work, riding home from work on the Hayabusa, just daydreaming, thinking, and when you get to the garage next, I wonder if that would work. And off you go. Your creative juices are flowing and you think of something completely different. Before you know it, that exists. So had I made a plan at the beginning, had I designed this to look a certain way and done exactly that, the trellis bars wouldn't exist, and that would be a shame because I think they look rather decent. So for now, I think I'm not going to make a plan for the tail piece either. I'm going to allow for creative process. I've got a basic idea of how I'm going to put it together, and that will evolve and you'll see that go. And it is a reasonably long journey. There's a fair old bit of fabrication, but there's a couple of things I'm not quite sure how to do. So what I'm going to do is very much what I did with this. I'm going to do the first stage. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, that old proverb. So the first thing is to deal with the lugs. These are here, come on in, pen. These little tabs, one there and that one there, these I welded on back when I was messing around with the bare steel. And I did them back then because I didn't want to be welding on finished stuff that's all connected up and they're on and they're in place. And what they are is they're a little piece of that, little piece of angle line, and I just lopped off 1 inch of angle line like that. If you come in there, look, I just put it on there and I just literally welded really heavily in there and across the sides heavily, so that is super strong. And indeed, when they were on, looking at both sides, they were a little bit cocked out, so I just beat on that with a hammer about 4 times, big 2-pound hammer, and got it absolutely straight. So I know they're strong, and this one included, and I know that these are going to be thick 1/4 inch mild steel heavyweight tabs to hold the back end. Again, preparing for a job that's going to be long term, and when I've done it and it's finished, I don't want to mess about and to revisit anything. So making the tabs strong enough so they don't go breaking off later on, that's quite important. So the first job, before I do anything else, is to finalise the preparation of the tabs. All I've done for them for now, if you look, is I've just popped a 4mm pilot hole in there, in the centre, so that I could centre things up when I need to put them on. That's all it is, nothing more, because I didn't want to be putting a centre punch on and beating them hard later on. I just want them to stay exactly as they are, because that can bend them a little bit, being just mild steel. So at the moment, all I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to show you, if you come on over, this is giving me a bit of a process. Now this has been the process so far. if we take one of these, this is cutting a thread. What I've got to do with these is like that. That's an 8mm. I'm going to go with M8, 8mm metric bolts, and these are just temporary. I've got 4 bolts to bolt it on with just for now. And before we do anything else, before I make any of this tailpiece, before I go anywhere with it, I've got to be sure that it's bolted on with something completely solid and something completely reliable. And I think an 8mm bolt, 4 8mm bolts, it ain't going anywhere. Remember, you're going to sit your body weight on it, so I think that's the minimum. So what I need is that finished affair on the bike. And just in case, because Penny said it, some people might not know, when you just say just cut a thread in that, it may not know how to do it. So what I thought I'd do, just to kick off, the very first job is I'm going to cut the threads in these and drill them out to full size. I'm going to show you just very quickly on this how you do it. First of all, I've just put a pilot hole in, so this is just a very quick how-to on cutting a thread, just by starting off, because obviously I guess many people do stuff in their garage, but sometimes that stuff stops short of fabrication. And if you've never done cutting threads before, if you've never done any form of engineering stuff on your bike, it's not a difficult process. It truly isn't, and I want to show you it in reasonable easy fashion. So this is just a little spare piece on here, and all you do first of all, you're drilling through a 1/4 inch. Now obviously it's a 1/4 inch thick, so if you drill a pilot hole first, pilot hole being like a little leader hole, it makes a hole where you need it made, and it starts you off. So that's where the bike is at the moment. That's all I've got in the frame lugs right now, so I've got to drill those out in a second. Now I've decided, as I said, to go with an 8mm metric bolt. Later on I will get some, let's just show you these. There's a guy nearby who does fasteners. What I'll be going with eventually is that kind of head, and these are fine, but these are M8 as well, but they're too long. I need one without a shaft here. I need it threaded all the way to the head and just 25mm long like that. So what I will be getting once I get nearer the end is 4 25mm M8 Allen heads, and there'll be a nicer fastener because I can just put a lock nut on the back, and it'll be stainless steel as well. But just for now, they're just some basic ordinary mild steel bolts which will serve for location purposes for the build. So an 8mm. If you've never cut threads before, this is a set of taps. That's an M8 tap, M8 meaning 8mm or metric 8, and that's a cleaning tap, and that's a cutting tap. The cutting tap has this chamfered or rubbed away end to help it cut into the thread. But before we go anywhere, before we wind that tool into the steel to cut the thread, you need to get the right size blind hole or blank hole. Now it's M8, so I go with 7mm, which is a millimetre too small. Obviously if you drill an 8mm hole through there, then your bolt's just going to drop right through, which won't be a lot of use. So before we go any further, just take that leader hole or pilot hole out to 8mm. I know I should be probably drilling on a wood base or something. There we are. So that's just a hole, a 7mm straightforward blank hole. I'm going to cut it out to 8mm, just as a little demo there. Now that's, you might call it a tap wrench, a few different names for it. You can buy taps, dies, you can buy these little sets from just about any tool shop. So it's got a little keep in there, tap goes in, and you just wind it together like a little vice, and that holds the tool ready so you can turn it. Now when you're going to cut a thread, you can get some fancy ass cutting compounds, which I remember using when I was at school, but you don't need them, to be quite honest. Just a dab of grease on the end, and the reason for this quite obviously is because you're going to be grinding or literally forcing a sharp cutting tool against some bare steel, and obviously you don't want it to drag. If it can possibly run nice and smoothly, then a little bit of grease. So pop the tool in. Now this chamfered end that I showed you, this rubbed away bit where there's no cutting blade, these little blades here, this chamfered end, it will fit into the 7mm hole. It actually goes in. You see it just goes in and locates. And then the idea is to hold it at exactly 90 degrees to the job and slowly, just with a little bit of forward pressure, just cut your way in. And you can feel, this is something that you very much feel with your hands as you can feel the tool hit. You might be able to hear that. You can hear it, it's actually started to cut already, straight away. Now, another little trick, another little advice on cutting a thread, turn the tap wrench half a turn and then turn back. You hear that little crack? I'll show you again. That's the cutting face there. So we cut another half a turn, doesn't make much noise, and you turn back and you get a crack. And that cracking noise, what that does is, as you turn the tap wrench in, as you cut the thread in, as it's cutting in, it's taking swarf off, it's cutting metal off, and those little bits of swarf get caught up and they will actually plug up and bung up the thread. And if you just keep grinding in against them, it will bung up and you'll ruin the thread. The actual thread, when you look at it, it will have little digs and cuts in it. It won't be a clean thread at all. And if it's not a clean thread, it's not a reliable thread. So come round a half and back a quarter and just keep going. Half, cutting back each time. Here we are. I'm just going to come on the side there. Keep going through at the same angle, and you'll see lots and lots of mess. Now you've cut that through with the tapered one, so gently take it out, because remember this is very sharp and it's extremely hard, and the hardness of the tool means that you will end up with damage to the thread. So when you take out the cutting one, the leading one, and you put the cleaning thread in, and then just lead that through. There's a bit of grease in there already, and just gently go through. Now that's already got a thread in it, so just pick up the thread gently, and you'll find that this tool will just have it will have a little bit more resistance than the first one did, and you'll find it will take metal off, but not much. And there we are, we're through. And just lead it through one direction, like that, then the other, until the thread actually spins, like that. And there you are, you've cut a very successful 8mm metric thread, into which you can then screw an 8mm bolt. And then you get a lovely non-moving snug fit. Okay, and then on this particular case, when the seat unit's finished and made, I'll be putting a little lock nut on the back, or perhaps a wing nut or something, just to lock that in position so it doesn't come out. There we are. That's how you cut a thread, if you didn't know. So now I've just got to drill the 4 out on the bike and run a tap, 2 taps through those, make sure all those threads are in place. So let's get on with some proper work. Okay, now we're in this for real. If you screw this up, you can go out to 10mm, but I'd rather not. So I'm going to try and take my time into the pilot hole, and then just try and, as 90 degrees as possible. That's it. 1 7mm hole. Same in that one. Right, there we are. Now, just because there is a neat little trick I like to do. I know you can get proper tools.
Take your Eltons off.
Take your Eltons off. You can get proper tools for cutting, taking out burrs. Proper deburring tool. But again, just if you haven't got one, what you can use, as I've got here, is a big 13mm drill bit, and just by hand, just take that burr out. So you put a little tiny edge in there, and that makes just a nice edge. Just takes that burr off by hand. You don't need a tool of any kind. You don't really need to chamfer it. You just want to take the burr off gently. So just use a big fat drill bit by hand, and it just takes the burr off. If you use a proper chamfer tool, you won't have much thread left because you'll be taking out metal you need to use. Well, done. Right. Okay. Now the first one again. You see the difference in those. I'll show you again. That one, the cutting blade goes right out to the edge, and if you start cutting with this tool, you will find sometimes you can cross thread it at the beginning and screw up the hole. If you start with this tool, let me just clean that a bit, the swarf and grease out of it. There we are. You see how this is polished away at the ends. It gives you a lovely soft lead in, so the thread that you cut is almost guaranteed to be a good, solid, reliable thread. Just hearing the cut, listening for it crack, it's nice. And once it stops, you can feel the amount of force that you need to put on that tool. It will diminish. You'll get to a point where you'll feel that it takes less, and it starts to no longer feel like it's cutting or forcing itself in. There we are. That's it. Just run it through dry a couple of times like that, and you know you've got really nice smooth thread. Okay, last one. Just pop a little bit of grease in those little grooves so it collects the swarf and lubricates the thing through its gap. And again, just coming over the top close, or just see what I mean. You'll feel the bite straight away. This might look like a bolt with grooves in it, but it is a razor sharp cutting tool, and it will cut even stainless steel, although there's a different procedure for cutting threads in stainless. And so you feel it go through, nice smooth force with no lumps, and then back, break the swarf off. And at the point where the tap levels out, you'd have cut your thread completely all the way in, and it will work through on its own, and it will sound quite hissy. And if you feel any resistance, just be careful with it, because it's ever so sharp, and any resistance that you feel is it gnawing against the metal, so you don't want any damage to the thread when you're just trying to cut it. So we'll take that one out gently, not to let it kind of fall to one side, because the sharpness and hardness of this it will move, will damage the little thread you're putting in. Yeah, the wheel moves if you push on it then. Right, so you can see just in there, all this that you see there, that's all the swarf, that's the thread there, that's what you've cut out, all that metal, and that will. And you put, you sit yourself down
today.
Right. Sit yourself down before you fall down.
I think I'll sit down.
And then again with the different tap all the way through, just line it up gently, feel for the thread, use the sense of touch, just feel for it. It must be very easy like that. You want absolutely almost no resistance at all. You can see the way this is jerky moving. There's a little bit of, you feel it? Just, well, you can't feel it. I can. You can feel that. And once it's in there, that becomes smooth. And that second thread, that second tap going through, the reason that that's important is now, if you do it, it's lovely, silky smooth. So just using the first tap isn't enough. You'll end up with a mucky thread that can catch. Because once you put a soft bolt through there, it's a mild steel bolt. If you've got any bits of swarf or disruptions in that thread,
Jet's about.
Jet's about today, air show. So that's out. And then we just blow out any last bits of swarf in there and poke a bolt in it. There we go. And this again is part of the process. If you put your bolt in, it should feel nice and smooth and sound smooth, no crunchy or grittiness. Nice smooth thread.
Oh, sorry.
Tea time. Now there's a little bit of swarf. That's it. Right, so that's the threads cut. So if you didn't know how to use these, if all you ever do is buy accessories and bolt them on your bike, that's cool, nothing wrong with that. But at that level, you really never get involved with taps and threads. Easy enough to do, that's how you do it. If it's metric, cut 1mm hole, smaller than the size, and then cut the thread through. Right, pretty much all four of them. So that's taken any galvanising or plating of any kind off there, made them bare steel, which is ideal for welding. You can't weld to shitty metal. If you've got crappy finishes, if you've got anodizing, plating, anything that's on there, it won't weld in a secure way. But that now, you know, the rule of thumb is shiny steel. Nice bright silver shiny steel, and you'll get a lovely weld in there. And then when you start bending it and stuff, you'll get it nice and clean, and you won't end up with all kinds of problems and it cracking later on. So there we are. That's it. All I've done today is put these 4 threads in place. Remember what I said, journey of 1,000 miles and all that. These are just 4 basic threads to hold the tail to form the jig. And these plates will form the first point of contact. I haven't considered yet, because they're quite big and quite flat, what I may do is weld a washer on the inside, and that will give some thickness to it. I kind of like them to be a bit thicker. I've got a few more of these, so I may just weld 2 together, and the way you do that is drill a hole through the side, put it on and plug weld it, so you've got 2 in one piece. But those are all things which I tend to consider later on. And consideration and taking your time to consider what stage you're going to do next produces the best results. It's as simple as that, and it's how I managed to come up with the trellis on the frame. It wasn't something I thought about until I got to that stage. And today I've made that first step, which is what I wanted to do. And hopefully a little how-to on cutting threads has given you some insight too. If you're going to fit anything to your bike and you need to cut thread for it, go and buy yourself a little DIY tap and die set. It isn't expensive, and you can have loads of fun cutting threads on things. So there we are. First step of project seat unit. It's going to be a long-winded one, this, I'm afraid. As you can see, I've only literally just got these in place, that's it. But they're threaded in, they're nice and secure, and they're a good job. Taking the time to do each step in a fashion and in a manner that is as good as you can possibly do. It's the highest possible standard that you're able to do, whether you be an amateur, whether you be the highest standard of engineer like my mate Dave. It doesn't matter. Do the best possible job you can on each little thing that you do along the project, so that when you move on you don't have to revisit it, and secondly so that the finished job, which is a collection of all your little jobs put together, is actually the highest standard of overall job. I'd like to think that all this here is the highest standard I can achieve so far. I don't look at any of this now and think, I wish I'd done that a bit better, or I wish I'd just done that if I took the time. I hate doing that. I'm a little bit OCD, as I think I've said many times, and if I do that I just have to go back to it. It bugs me enough, I just got to go back and do it again. It's a bit like this engine cage here. I know I could have done a better job, and that will be probably coming off in the favour of something that's a little bit better in the future. But for now, tail panel, seat unit, project started at last. So thanks for watching, appreciate it. Join us for the next one, and I'll hopefully start bending up some of the steel to make the basis of the frame. Ride safe, I'll see you next time.